Wardsend Cemetery is very beautiful. There's trees everywhere and little winding pathways, and many of the graves are almost hidden away behind the ivy and the trunks and the branches. They really give a sense of Sheffield at a different time. I think one thing that puts the outrages and the cemetery into context is understanding how little the working class were protected by the law. The unions really came about in order to support workers who were out of work through union fees. They made sure that workers had access to higher wages. At this time, none of the law would do any of this for the working class. The general form of rattening was some form of sabotage, but they could be much more violent, which was the case for the Sheffield Outrages.
The Sheffield Outrages is a series of events that took place starting in the 1830s and 40s and culminated in a government commission in 1867 which investigated these violent events that took place which involved attacks on people. But rattening, in the Sheffield sense, means to steal or damage the equipment or tools of a workman in order to try and intimidate them or to coerce them to follow what the union is doing or to stop doing something that they feel is damaging to the union and its members. Rattening was very common in Sheffield. People accepted rattening. They thought it was part and parcel of being the member of the trade, and they saw the evidence because when there was a union in the trade, the wages were higher.
In the case of the rattening that led to the death of a Sheffield resident, it was non-union members who were being rattened. The owner of Green Lane Works in Kelham Island, a grinder's workshop, brought in non-union members from Masborough. The union members at the Green Lane Workshop walked out. The owner brought in more non-union members, which led to these Masborough workers being attacked by union members.
Several of the grinders from Masborough were attacked in the street, and the officials of the union, one particular person they asked to carry out an attack on one of these grinders was Robert Renshaw.
Initially, he was asked to assault George Wasnage, but he himself decided that it would be better to throw an explosive parcel into the window of Wasnage's house on Acorn Street.
He was given 10 shillings to buy 3 pounds of gunpowder, a canister, a fuse. He wrapped it in brown paper and then he put it in his coat pocket and he carried it around for several days. And on the 23rd of November 1861, he threw the canister through the first floor window of the house.
Inside the house wasn't just George Wasnage though, it was also his wife, his young son and an elderly lodger, Mrs. O'Rourke. The parcel that had been thrown through the window landed in Mrs. O'Rourke's room and she was unable to act to protect herself and ended up being the most wounded out of the people in the house. Harriet Wasnage, George's wife, she was injured and temporarily blinded and in fact permanently disabled by her injuries, but she survived, while Mrs. O'Rourke succumbed to her injuries only a few weeks later. Robert Renshaw had actually not fully fled the scene. He had gone and waited in a nearby churchyard and returned when he'd heard commotion to make sure that he'd done his job properly in hopes for higher pay.
George Wasnage was also quite badly burnt, which made it difficult for him to work. So I think the Wasnages did not stay in Sheffield all that long, and I think they either went back to Masborough or back to Rotherham.
The 1867 Sheffield Commission was brought about to investigate these rattenings, which had eventually turned lethal. A significant number of union workers in Sheffield were brought forward to speak about their involvement in various Rattenings. These workers were actually granted immunity on the condition that they provided full confessions. It's believed by other witnesses that Robert Renshaw withheld a significant amount of his confession, as he only confessed his own crimes and didn't discuss the involvement of anyone else. Witnesses had actually seen more than one person present when a parcel was thrown into the window. Robert Renshaw claimed that he was the only perpetrator in this event. And it seems that he was believed because he was granted his immunity and he was able to continue working in Sheffield and faced no jail time or anything for the crime.
Samuel John Stacey was an official of the Edge Tool Grinders Union. He was asked if he would admit that his union carried out rattening, and he said, "Yes, and I consider it no sin." I think his answers illustrate what the union members and the union leaders thought about rattening and how they found it both useful and just.
The development of unions and the outrages themselves are so significant to Sheffield's history and what makes Sheffield the city it is today. And I just hope that more people will learn about it and feel like they understand the city more and appreciate the city more because of it.